we'll just crash straight into the first film, which is unfortunately the Eurovision Song Contest, The Story of Fire Saga.
Unfortunately, Scott, am I to guess? Am I to guess already what your opinion of this is? Aye, Eurovision Song Contest, The Story of Fire Saga. Lars Eriksson, Will Ferrell, has dreamt of representing Iceland in the Eurovision Song Contest since seeing ABBA win with Waterloo in 1974 when he was just a young boy. To the eternal shame of his father Eric, Pierce Brosnan, Lars has never relinquished that dream, even into middle age, though he is aided in perpetuity by childhood friend and musical collaborator Sigrid, Rachel McAdams, with whom he performs as the titular Fire Saga. Following a freak explosion at a Eurovision yacht party, in which all seemingly viable national representatives are killed, Fire Saga emerge as the only candidates able to take on the mantle. If that sounds somewhat contrived, then it is, as a somewhat convoluted plot by the scheming Victor Carlsson, Michael Persbrandt, whose machinations and motivations I genuinely cannot remember just a scant fortnight after watching this film. Perhaps it's fitting that such an embarrassing spectacle of international shame as the Eurovision Song Contest has been treated to such an embarrassing spectacle of international shame as is perpetrated here by Netflix and Will Ferrell, though I doubt I'd be alone in suggesting that the competition's rich history of unfettered camp and unintentional cringe really ought to provide rich pickings for a multitude of comedic insights. Instead, what we get is self-confessed Eurovision fan Ferrell's self-indulgent shenanigans for 2 hours and 3 minutes, which boils down to reacting with shock and or confusion to a multitude of zany events, none of which do much to endear us to our central characters or their dream-taken flight. Frustratingly, there are parts around the edges that occasionally threaten to perhaps hint at the subtle notion that they know a guy who knows a guy who once said something funny. Dan Stevens once or twice borders on amusing as Alexander Lemtov, the Russian contestant whose entire scripted reason for being seems to be to shame the homophobia of the Moscow establishment, and Pierce Brosnan, whose involvement clearly came about as an opportunity to make bank for taking a 2-week vacation in Iceland, who provides the only genuine laugh I encountered purely through his deployment of what he presumably perceives to be a suitable regional accent. I think maybe he got the hemisphere right, but I still couldn't guess latitude or longitude. Anywho, there's not a lot to enjoy here, and I don't intend on wasting much of either your time or mine talking about it. It says something that Ferrell, who co-writes and is apparently such a huge fan of the contest, can't even get the hosting or the scoring mechanics right, and that the script lacks anything approaching the level of affection for its subject matter that you might expect. For a topic affording such a rich vein of inspiration, Eurovision turns out to be an incredibly uninspired and anodyne experience, an accusation which, despite my loathing of the actual event itself, one could never level in its direction. Did I mention Fire Saga win after all is apparently lost? Well, now you definitely don't need to watch it, and you owe me one.
Yeah, I've seen this film several times before. It was best when it was Blades of Glory, which was good, but I've seen it a number of times since. You're familiar with it yourself, I'm sure. It's where Will Ferrell shouts in a silly accent while being slightly confused, you know. And it was also considerably better when it was the Father Ted episode of Song for Europe, which is largely the plot of this, at least the reason for the villain.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's basically like Iceland can't afford it, but Father Ted's version was much, much funnier, because, well, it was Father Ted and not this. That said, and while I have no interest in the Eurovision Song Contest at all, having watched a bit of it twice maybe, I didn't hate this, which honestly surprises me. I don't know, it's just pointless. It's trying so hard to be funny, like, oh, the whole yeah ding dong thing, and it's awkward and cringeworthy for the most part, but honestly I didn't hate it, and I suspected I would. It's not Holmes and Watson, and for that I am grateful. But I think I was maybe just more distracted by the fact that it was meant to be set in Edinburgh, and because I know Edinburgh quite well, I'm watching how they've got the geography of Edinburgh completely wrong, including the fact that the main stadium's in Glasgow. But that's like minor local interest, though. It's just not going to mean anything to most other people. Honestly, it's not as bad as it could have been, and I didn't hate my time with it. I even laughed at a couple points, but it's pretty forgettable.
Yeah, I think I watched maybe 20 minutes of it in various captures when my wife was watching it, and I remembered nothing of it, and I certainly don't remember laughing at any of those 20 minutes. So, yes, I did not make me want to go and seek out the whole experience. So, no.
It wasn't bad enough for me to like really dislike or anything, and I watched it, okay, I am looking at this, I can see it, I don't hate it, so I can't summon the energy to switch it off. It's not that bad.
It occupied space for 2 hours.
Wow. Yes. Yes. And on that note again, I mean, please come on. How many times are we going to have to say this? 2 hours for this? Really?
Yes, I'm sure people are sick of hearing us talking about running times, but it's such a valid complaint because this film does not merit 2 hours. Very few comedies do. And just even taken away from the fact that you don't find this a comedy, and for the most part I don't either, but there's not 2 hours worth of material in here.
No.
Why? It's so self-indulgent, and it just seems to be such a trend nowadays, and I don't understand where it's coming from.
It's as if the people involved think it's some sort of value proposition, which I can assure you in this case it certainly is not. This might be a decent movie if it were 80 minutes long.
Yeah, I have the feeling that just in Hollywood in general, that too much power has shifted away from editors to directors, and I don't know how you get away from that because directors are what the names of people are attracted to. They carry so much more clout, but I think a lot of directors need to put their ego aside and just leave things in the hands of a competent editor.
Yes, I don't disagree. I think there's also a lot of sort of self-congratulatory backslapping in these comedic circles amongst the sort of in-crowd of directors working with these particular actors, and I think there are a lot of egos on the acting side who probably, maybe some directors aren't comfortable or just don't see the necessity to tell people to shut up and rein it in a bit and exercise some sort of restraint. But having said that, this isn't the sort of film where I get the impression Will Ferrell has gone off on a lot of sort of zany ad-libs that he's just insisted get kept in. For the most part, it's really just quite uneventful and poorly scripted, I think, is biggest sin.
It doesn't quite smack of, say, a Jim Carrey vehicle or anything like that, where you just know that a director's not been able to control him.
Yeah. But anyway, there we go. I feel like we've probably spent enough time talking about this already.
More than likely.
Yes.